Hi, Lindsay. I'm so happy to be with you today.
I am so happy to have you here today. It's
Thank you.
interesting because when I first launched the Retaility, it's still long form features, but we were in such a different era. It was COVID, and it was like the tail end of that, and so it was going into people's homes and doing it from that perspective. And then it became once we started connecting with people again in IRL. Then I started having people do these in conversations together.
Mm.
And now that we're in this whole other era of life being busy, thank goodness, all over again, it's FaceTime with because I feel like it's so hard now
Yeah.
that we're all on the go again. It's hard to kind of carve out that time, but you're someone where we've been, I think, in the same rooms together, and I didn't put that together until later. And I thought, anytime I'm curious about someone, we're both very curious people. I have to
Yeah.
find the time to, get to know them. And I figured what better way than to have Brutality readers also get to know you.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind. For me, writers are my rock stars, and so I've loved your writing from afar for a while, and so I'm so grateful to be in conversation with you.
Well, how sweet of you to say. And I have to also credit you. I had done this modern love piece about my daughter, Evan, essentially. And I send it out to people I know well, people I don't know well. And we had both attended Sally and Argent and She Pivots their dinner, and they'd sent out. I thought, you know what? We didn't get a chance to meet. I'll include her. And you are one of the very few people who acknowledge receiving it. And that says something about a person.
Oh
So
my God,
I want
thank
to
you.
credit you. Yes.
That's
Yeah,
sweet.
so it meant a lot to hear from you. And I was like, we need to feature her. So let's get into it. The Brutality is a bit of a deep dive. I actually want to backtrack. What were you like as a kid growing up? I mean, I'm assuming it started with curiosity, but what did you think you wanted to be doing when you were a kid?
I love talking about this actually. I have a school photo of myself from when I was 6 years old that I keep in my wallet and one on my phone. And before I have a big event, I always look at it
Hmm.
because I feel that it calms my nerves because really I'm only trying to make her proud. And I was the same girl. My mom tells me stories about how I would not go play with people in the park or outside. I would sit on her foot while she was with all her like adult friends, her girlfriends, and listen to their stories. And before bedtime, I would say, "Tell me a good, bad story." I've loved stories my entire life, and I think I was always so curious about how we can maximize the time we have on this earth. And so when I interview people, I get to learn to live better through their stories. And I cannot think of a better job. You must feel so similarly.
100%. And though I think for me, maybe it started a little differently, only in that growing up, I was so fixated on Los Angeles. I was from Florida, and from afar, Los Angeles was like the mecca and
Yes.
actors. And so that's what was interesting to me. And so I started a website way back in the day. We're talking like 97, not to date myself here, but it was
Wow.
my way of connecting from a distance with
Ah,
the people who were so interesting to me then. And obviously, your interests as you get older, I was a teenager, your interests change. And so actors are interesting to me, but only as humans. And to me, there are many, many interesting people in this world. So I'd love to say it
but
started
look at
with
that through line.
yeah, who knows? I mean, I think what we probably also have in common though is it I
Cool.
didn't realize it was storytelling, but it's storytelling. It's the stories we tell each other, tell ourselves, we overhear. So, that all makes sense. And so then in what way did your parents nurture that? Because I think, a lot of parents would probably be like, get out, get with, go see children your own age. So yeah, tell me a little bit about how your parents nurtured that element of your personality.
That's really funny. I've never had anyone ask me that. I think there was a little bit of nurture and a little bit of get out of the house and play with kids and be like everybody else. I definitely heard those words, but to my parents' credit, like they let me dress the way I wanted. I was wearing cowboy boots and skirts and tie-dye shirts and beads. And, my mom, I'm sure, wanted to dress me more streamlined and beautifully like all the other kids in class. And she just really let me be who I was. She never forced me to hug people. She really like let me be me. And on the other side of my family, my dad and his parents, they're all educators. And so every Sunday we would go to my grandparents' house, and it was in this place in Lincolnwood, Illinois, and they had a duplex, and it was small, and it was like honestly a little bit dirty, and not this gorgeous house that you would think we would all want to gather at. And it was everybody's favorite place. We would sit in their little living room and talk and talk and talk for hours. And I just remember my grandfather asking me 1,000 questions, and
Mm.
I would be like, I think 8 or 9. And he would be like, so they called me Dolly. And he'd say, so Dolly, what do you think of Bush? You think he's a good president? And like, it was just, I wanted to impress him. And so I wanted to be in the know. And I think that it actually like really cultivated so much of my political interests, my social interests, my cultural interests. And I love questions, but I really honor him in that way because I think when you ask kids questions, it helps build their confidence.
Oh,
And he
absolutely.
did that for me.
Absolutely. Well, I was going to ask you because you are so confident in a way
Oh.
that feels so natural. It doesn't feel forced. You just seem so naturally poised and thoughtful. And I really noticed that I'm trying to remember which interview it was, but somebody said something about what the meaning of namaste was. And you said, I didn't know that. And I thought that's a confident person because most interviewers don't typically necessarily acknowledge, oh, I didn't know that. They want to, seem like the smartest person in the room, I suppose. And I thought that's a confident person because, of course, we're not expected to. That's why we're learning. And I really thought that said something about you.
Oh my
Um,
God, Lindsay, thanks for noticing that.
of course. So, yes, it sounds like so that foundation, is that where it started for you? I mean, have you always considered yourself a confident person? Where does your confidence come from?
Yeah, I struggled with a lot of things in my life. Like it's not like I was always confident in every moment, but I have always felt good about myself. I felt confident about my values and my integrity and my decisions. I never, I here and there I have shame hangovers of like, I said too much or I shouldn't have said that in the room.
Okay.
But overarchingly for the big stuff, I feel good about how I've treated people. And I think that that helps you move through the world with confidence. And I interviewed a child psychologist who sort of changed my perspective on all of this because my dad always said his number one thing was to raise a confident kid. A lot of parents say, I want them to be happy, I want them to be kind. My dad said, I want them to be confident. And I thought that was interesting. So I asked the child psychologist, and she said competence equals confidence.
Hmm.
So in order to raise a confident kid, they have to do stuff and they have to fail. They have to know, like, figure out how to do laundry and how to ice skate or, random things. But just
Right.
by doing it, you become confident in the world. And I think my parents were doers. They let me do stuff. They let me mess up. I ran for school president and lost, and it was embarrassing. So
Hmm,
they
that's a good
always just, yeah, I think like I was lucky because I had the trampoline of their love. So I never felt like I had nowhere to turn. So I always felt it was okay to fail.
No, that makes perfect sense. And actually, as you're saying that, it reminds me of how Sarah Blakely, who does Spanx and Sneaks, her dad, I feel like you know everything about everyone too, because obviously talk to everyone and you're so well read. But I love that her father used to sit around the dinner table and say, what did you fail at this week? And I thought,
Oh,
isn't that a great, so we started doing a version of that with our son. He's only 4. So
ooh, what do you say? What do you guys
we
do?
say, well, right now, just because it kid terms, and we didn't read this anywhere, it's just something that we started doing was what was your high of the week and what was your low of the week? And it's always interesting to hear sometimes they're the one and the same because he's 4 and he's, figuring out what anything really means. But yeah, I just think it's fascinating how I'm obviously in this unique space now. I guess it's not that unique parenthood, but figuring out how to raise that confident kid. So I guess that's also why it struck me because if I'm being honest, I think people who don't know me well maybe would think I'm confident. I don't know, it's hard to view yourself, but I think the way I've always
Yeah.
viewed myself is not necessarily that way. I'm more of an
Um,
introvert who sort of masquerades as an extrovert, though I kind of wonder, I feel like, we were similar in that you were like hanging to your mom's leg. I used to talk to my friends' parents.
yes.
To
Oh,
me, they were the
yes.
most interesting. They would find me, they would all be outside playing, and I would be sitting there having a conversation with, the mom. So I don't know.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think when you're a reader or a writer, you're sort of a natural observer. And so it sounds like you and I are both observers. And I don't know how you are at a party, but um, I'm a little bit of an ambivert. I kind of walk into a room and I observe, I watch people, I look at everything, and then I'll jump in, but I don't jump in right away.
Fair. So left to my own devices, I would just, be a fly on the wall. Not
Yeah.
for lack of wanting to, but it didn't necessarily have it in me to, on a personal level, approach people. Like I always feel like, oh, who wants to meet me? But when I first got my start out here in Los Angeles, I mean, as you know, entertainment is the recipe du jour. That's, what you do here. And so my initial job was with InStyle and going up to strangers, celebrities, and interviewing them on the spot, not a red carpet, like inside of events. And so it kind of it trained me along the way to find that inner confidence, I guess.
Oh my God, that is
But
so scary.
it
That is so
was.
hard to do. Can I ask you, what was like your icebreaker? Would you notice something about them? Would you like,
Oh,
because
that's
people
so.
are so guarded like that, you
And they
know?
should be. They have every reason to be. They didn't know me from a hole in the wall. I mean, obviously, with time, it got easier because I was seeing so many of the same faces that there was a rapport. I
Yeah.
didn't have an icebreaker. I think for me, I knew that whatever I'm getting, I need to get quickly. And I had the confidence of being able to say in style and knowing that they understood what that line of questioning was going
Yes.
to look like and probably wanted to, and not always. I mean, off camera, we'll have a conversation about all that. I mean, there are some horror stories with that too.
I feel like you have tea. You have an entire book of tea that we sort of need, but at some point you'll publish it.
Probably from a fictional lens, never. Because I do feel like I've observed so much about human behavior. Like, I think how you treat other people, it tells you a lot about a person. And I think those years really did teach me a lot about human nature, even though, yes, it was through
Yes.
the lens of celebrity. But no, I would essentially just have the confidence knowing they chances are might
Wow.
want to talk. But really, I gave myself pep talks on the way there. I was like, you are as smart as these people. I don't know. It's an interesting beat, but
Yes.
but I'm gonna catch myself here because I knew in talking with you, even though yes, every good interview is a conversation. I was like, wait, she's gonna be so good at asking me things. And I'll say to you what my husband said to me when the first time we ever hung out. He's like said, last time we hung out, I didn't get a word in. You asked so many questions. So I'm gonna stop you there.
Oh my God, I
Isn't that
love that.
funny? And I
That's the
think
best compliment.
I see it that way. I don't know if he meant that. But 20 years later, here we are.
That's so
Um,
funny.
but no, okay, so now I want to jump into the college years. I mean, how
Yeah.
did you find your way to journalism, which obviously has taken on a whole different life in the last handful of years? But how did you
Yeah.
find your way to journalism? Because I know you were a political science communications major. Yes.
Oh my God. I love how much research you did. I'm so grateful.
Of course.
Um, that is like very rare. Yes, I was a political science major. I think I that's like an ode to my grandfather and my father, because our dinner conversations were very political.
Mhm.
Um, and I sort of live by the Bill Clinton phrase that he said in his first inauguration, that everything that's wrong with America can be fixed by everything that's right with America.
Mm.
And I still feel like we live in the best country in the world. And so I'm never apathetic about it, no matter how hard or difficult or challenging it gets. And I think that sense of patriotism and also curiosity about the world allowed me to like really learn how to think, not what to think in college. And about a year in, you have to pick a major. And I called my mom and I said, okay, I'm going to do communications. I want to do like on camera journalism. And my mom is super blunt and honest. And she goes, that's not a real major, no chance. And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, that's a major for people who like aren't actually in college. Like, no, pick something else. So I said, okay, fine, I'll be a double major. Anyways, it was really credit to her because I was a theater kid growing up, and she was like, you love to perform and you love the world and politics. I wonder if you would like broadcast journalism. It's sort of a mix of the two. And she was right because I applied for an internship in Madison, Wisconsin, where I went to school, and I fell in love. It was off to the races. I was working at the Fox station, and the cameras were 100 pounds, and I think I probably weighed 103 pounds then. And I was carrying them in the freezing cold weather in Madison, Wisconsin for hours on end, like after my classes at night. And I loved every minute of it. And I said, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to tell stories. And it's sort of snowballed from there. I ultimately moved to LA because I didn't get a job at a local news station. And I said, I think the internet is going to be a thing. And so, much to my parents' chagrin, in 2013, I moved into a garage in LA and started trying to follow my dreams.
I love every part of this in so many ways. There's so much to unpack with that, but I also love the internet. I think it's going to be a thing because
Yeah.
100%. I mean, going the site I had was back in 97. I mean, I'm also dating myself by saying that, but like I had a site
Yeah.
where I interviewed Christina Aguilera and Britney Spears. Like I understood the power of the
Wow.
internet, but where it was a slightly different era, I moved here and I felt so strongly about paying dues, traditional journalism, because people didn't see the value yet.
Yes, I so get that.
And also being this rule follower, like so, you stay in your lane. And at least once upon a time, clearly we're in an extremely different era of all of that. But I love that you had the foresight to
Mhm.
to recognize that there was a shift coming. So yeah, tell me, I mean,
Yeah.
we know what the traditional path, most people know what the traditional path of journalism looks like, but for you, how has that evolved? And in yeah, tell me a little bit, yeah, about you arrive in LA and then what?
Yeah. I love that you said that. I agree. I don't think I could have called it foresight at the time. I was just sort of following this feeling, this instinct that I had. And I think that I was maybe a little too entrepreneurial for journalism, and I didn't know it at the time. Because the network news track is very cookie cutter, even to this day, it is. And it's so valuable. I actually like really believe in institutions and institutional knowledge, but I don't think that was actually ever going to be for me.
Right.
And so I got to that garage. My grandmother is a Holocaust survivor, and a woman that she met in the Holocaust, which sounds like the plot of a movie, also survived. It was her friend, and she let me live in her garage for free. So I always am like, Barbara Streisand will play my grandmother, and I will play myself in the film. And yeah, I started applying for jobs, and nobody would answer me. And so I would send little notes with bamboo plants or cookies, and try and get them to respond, which I had a much higher hit rate when I sent a gift. And it sort of snowballed from there. One day, 6 months later, after lots of email back and forth, checking in, saying, "Hey, I'm really eager." One of the outlets called me and said, "Our host is sick. Can you be at the Paley Center in Beverly Hills in 3 hours?" And I said, "Absolutely." I didn't curse, but I said, "Yeah." And that was it. Once I started doing red carpets, I started building a reel, and I started networking. I mean, you must know from your time too with InStyle that like once you're in the room, you start seeing the same faces and meeting people, and it's much easier to network. To get into the room is so difficult. Um,
But it's
because you have not,
interesting. I'm
yeah,
sorry, no, just to jump in with what you were saying,
please.
because you had said, once you're in the room, but that's where I think you and I differ. Yes, getting in the room is hard, but I played the role I was sent there to play. I didn't, I think
Mm,
there really is something to what you're saying, where once you're in the room, you're still you, no matter how you wound up in that room, no one really knows. I think to me, it was like stepping out of line. If heaven forbid, I was myself for a minute, and that's an interesting
mm.
thing. But
Well,
take
to
it from
your
there.
credit,
Yeah.
I don't know because I think InStyle was such a big brand name. I was working for these small internet outlets that if I'm being quite candid, like I don't know that I had so much respect for them at the time. And so I kind of knew they were using me and I was using them.
I see.
Once I started working in more legacy media, like I ended up at Entertainment Tonight Online and um, and other places, I did feel that sense of loyalty and respect.
Hmm.
And you are representing a company, so I get what you're saying.
No, but I appreciate you sharing that too, because that makes sense too. I think sometimes the best advice is hearing other people's trial. It's observation, and so I think that's
Totally.
an interesting observation too for anyone listening that no, it's important to also respect who you're there for. But I
Yeah.
guess when you were in the room, you understood you were in that room for many reasons, not simply just, the outlet at hand. So that
Yeah, I
makes
don't think
sense.
that like the red carpet report that was started by like some random person, was ever gonna like help me live my dreams. It was my in.
That makes total sense. That makes
Yeah.
total sense. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay, and then you went to Chicago and you were on a morning show, and I love the story there because I think there's also a real lesson to be said for why, yes, you took the job as the youngest, morning show host, but then left. So would you mind speaking to that as
Yes.
well?
Oh my God, I didn't want to take the job, Lindsay, because I was dating this guy and he was my first big love. And I finally had like a foothold in Los Angeles and it was so hard to make friends and network at work. And I finally felt like I belonged here a little bit. And then I left Entertainment Tonight Online and I was unemployed. And I met Larry King through a friend at Nate and Al's in Beverly Hills. And Larry really, that one connection changed my life because Larry taught me how to ask questions. He made sure I knew how to tell a story. And I think just from sitting across from him at breakfast over and over again, that I really saw that my curiosity could take me anywhere I wanted to go because his had taken him into
Mm.
incredible rooms and across the ocean and into these like big adventures that I had always craved. And so that idea that you can't be what you can't see, like that really was sort of codified during my time with Larry. And then I got this job opportunity in Chicago. And I'm so grateful. Her name is Michelle Weiner. She's the motion lit department head at CAA. And she was a friend of mine in LA. And I called her about this job. And she was like, Danielle, if this man is the right man, he will be the right man in 2 years. You better take this job. So I packed up my bag and I moved back to Chicago. And in hindsight, it was so meant to be because my grandparents, who I mentioned earlier in our conversation, my grandfather ended up passing away at the end of my time there. And I thought, oh my God, I was meant to spend this time here. And I
Wow.
got a lot of family dinners with my brother and my parents, and it was beautiful. But I had two co-hosts, and I found out that my male co-host was making $60,000 more than me, and I couldn't even pay my rent. My parents were supplementing my rent each month, and I was so angry. It was in the middle of Time's Up and Me Too, and I was so emboldened by all the other women who were fighting for their worth. And the station I was working at didn't see my value, and so they offered me basically like a 5% raise, and I was making 100 grand. So I'm not great at math, but I think that was like $2,500, which was not going to help me pay my rent. So I quit. I bet on myself. I quit. Before I left, I went into the dressing room of my third co-host, who, my co-host Felicia and I are still great friends to this day. And I said, I have some information to share. It's not easy to hear. It's totally up to you what you do with it, but I think you should know. And I shared what I was making. I shared what my other co-host was making. And I moved back to LA and I moved in with this guy who I was dating, still long distance. 4 months later, moved out.
Hmm.
That is a whole another conversation in itself. That was like really, I would say, a traumatic event for a lot of different reasons. But it was also what put me on my path, Lindsay, which is so weird. But it was my dark night of the soul, and it ultimately threw me into therapy. And I have tons of books behind me. I started reading again. I'd always been a reader as a kid, and I read women's stories because therapy wasn't helping. I signed up for a triathlon that wasn't helping. I was so sad. I was like acutely depressed. And the only thing that I found reprieve in was reading other women's pain because I thought, okay, I'm not the first person to go through this.
Oh my God, sorry, that hit me. Wow. That's really powerful. Wow.
Thank you.
And so, okay, so that obviously on a personal level fed your soul, but then how did, because you're surrounded by books now professionally too. And
Yeah.
obviously you have Question Everything, and that podcast, I believe, started first.
Yes.
And then, which originally was pretty smart and
Yes.
rebranded, yes.
Oh my
And
God.
so
You are incredible. You're amazing at what you do.
you're very kind. Well, I can't talk to someone who's always prepared and not be prepared.
But do you know how many interviews I do? And I don't mind because, like, it can be a conversation, but I do
Sure.
so many interviews where people don't know anything about me. And it's so, I'm really grateful.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm blown away to hear that, because if you're known to be so prepared, how could anyone not be prepared? What was always interesting to me, I'll tag in real quickly and simply
Yeah.
say, what was always interesting to me is, sometimes I was sitting down with people, and I won't say the outlet and I won't say who. Um,
Name
Oh,
names, Lindzi. I'm just
I know,
kidding.
right? I think I once did, and I was like, "Please cut that." It was from a podcast,
Totally.
because it's just,
I know that
we
feeling.
know it's too small of a world. Even though this is outside my purview, it was a basketball player who wasn't yet playing for the Lakers, and I guess there had been some buzz that he was made. I don't cover sports. I have never covered sports. The reason why I was covering this was from, and it wasn't for InStyle, for the record, but it was for a very reputable newspaper. And I guess they
My
had,
curiosity is piqued, I will
I
tell
mean,
you.
it's so easy to put together that I should have just blurted out. But it was fascinating because I was only there because he also, by the way, like everyone else in this world, had a collaboration, a fashion collaboration. I covered largely fashion for them at that
Yeah.
time. And so that's what the topic was. If they were so concerned about what I might ask, which is against policy to ever share, as you know, questions or anything like that in advance. But if you're so concerned, do research on me. Look and see what kind of journalist am I? Honestly, I
Yeah.
think the gentleman behind him, which again is another conversation for another day. It was during the Trump era. It was right after the Hillary Clinton and Trump debate where he loomed over her. This
Mm.
man did the same thing to me as I'm on the phone with my editor, because I wanted to cut it right then and there. We're not covering this.
Mhm.
But in any case, yeah. What was my point with that? I couldn't tell you. I swear it tied into
I don't
something
know, but
you.
I love that you
Oh,
brought that moment
Mary.
up because I
Oh,
think that reverberated through I think about that moment still
who
because it
doesn't?
said so much about women. Every woman knows that feeling.
100%. And it was literally during that era. So he was taking a page out of that book. No, the point being, if you're so concerned, research me. So it's amazing
Yeah.
to me that people, they're sitting down, they're interviewing you. Why would they not be researching you? But in any case, so
Mm.
Question Everything. And
Yeah.
then how did you find your way to doing Bookmarked?
So I think almost every great thing in my life has come from pain and frustration, which I know and I say that professionally, but um, I I think I was always trying to fit a square into a round hole in my 20s and even the first few years of my 30s. Um, every job I had, I learned so much, and I to this day use so many skills that I learned at each place. So I don't regret any of the time, but I was so frustrated all the time because it was never the right fit. And so I was still auditioning for things. I had gone into a million times in every different department, and they, I think, wanted to hire me. And also, just it never was quite right. That the marketing department said no, the sales department said no, News said no, the original programming department said no, but they kept calling me in for these meetings. And one day I saw on Deadline that Tammy Filler was hired to run and she was moving from New York. She was at the Today Show. And I thought, oh, maybe this is my time because if somebody's coming from the Today Show, they're a little more cerebral. Maybe Tammy will see who I am. And so I had one mutual friend, and I called and I said, could you put a good word in? Could you send an email? And she said yes. So I ended up meeting with Tammy and nothing happened. And then months later, I got an audition. They were moving News to New York. And I auditioned, and then I got a call back, and then I did another call back. And it ultimately was up to me and a few other people. And so they flew me to New York, and it was, um, these things are just so unnecessarily chaotic. Like they know this is happening, but they call you at the last minute and are like, can you get on a flight in 3 hours? And then you just have to find an outfit, and you don't have sleep. And then you do the audition at 30 Rock, you know? And ultimately I didn't get it. And I fell onto my hotel bed in New York, and I'd never cried over a no before, but this no hit me so deeply because I felt like it was the end of the road. I kind of knew, like, if this wasn't it, it was never going to be it for me.
Mm.
And I was always, I can tell you're similar. Like, I always did the right thing. I sent the thank you note, and I went the extra mile, and I was like, what more like, what
Yeah.
do I do now? This was my dream. I had no other dream. I felt called.
Yeah.
And it was a big no. And I was dating a different guy at this time who lived in New York, and we were only like 3 weeks into having met. And he walked into the hotel room, and I was just crying, and it was kind of too early to be like a mess in front of him. And he sat on the bed with me, and he said, you can be upset for a day or two, and then you need to go hire yourself. And I was like, you don't really get it. Like, in what I do, you have to be hired. Like, the Today Show, Good Morning America, at the highest level, they are hiring people. And he goes, and all those people, Danielle, just have jobs. If they were fired tomorrow, they are in the same position that you are. And I'm not saying they're not talented, but they just have jobs. And he also said to me, it seems to me like people don't see you the way you see yourself. So you better go make them see you that way. And I was so angry with him, but he was right. And so fast forward, COVID hit about a month and a half later, and I decided it was time to launch my podcast. And it was sort of like at the right time of podcasting. I was like right in the sweet spot. And I launched a podcast called Pretty Smart. And the idea was putting a new spin on pretty, pretty bold, pretty strong, pretty witty, pretty smart. And because I'd interviewed all these celebrities, and everybody always cared about how pretty they were, their looks, what they were wearing. And I was like, these women are like, they have a lot to them. And so, like, I wonder if I could get a celebrity interview and talk about something else. And ultimately, that turned into Question Everything. And the craziest part about all of this is that that woman, Tammy Filler from E, years later called me one day and said, Danielle, we have a show for you. Do you want to come do it? And I was like an audition. I'm like, I'm done auditioning. And she was like, no, 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 I want you to do the show. Like, I know you can do live TV. And I said, Tammy, why are you hiring me? And she said, oh, that's easy. I love your podcast.
Oh,
And it was the greatest validation that that guy was right, but ultimately that betting on yourself is always the right move, because I poured all of my savings into that podcast because I wanted it to be video. And I was so scared. Like, there were so many moments where I was like, what the hell am I doing? I have screenshots of my bank account being at like $333, and I didn't know how I was going to pay my rent or the people that were freelancing for me to make this podcast possible. And ultimately, I ended up being able to build something and build sort of a niche and a presence. But there was something missing. And I had, like I shared before, been a reader my whole life. And I
right.
saw what Reese Witherspoon was doing with Reese's book club. And I would follow each month. And I thought, wow, like, this community is so engaged. Like, every time she would release the book pick, thousands of people were commenting, and they were so excited. And I was like, what's happening in between each book launch? Like, there's a whole month and there's no content. I think there needs to be a show here, and they need to own Book Talk and own YouTube. And I spent $500 putting a pitch deck together that looked like a Hello Sunshine deck. I tried to make it look like perfectly tailored to them. And it was $500 I didn't have. And I DM'd the CEO of Hello Sunshine, and I said, what's your email? And she didn't reply. And 2 weeks later, I'd been sitting on it and ruminating, like, what's my next step? Because when I know something is right, I will not give up. Like I'm a dog with a bone. No means next option to me. So I knew this was right, and I just sent her the link to the deck, and she 2 minutes later said, "This is interesting. Email me." And so ultimately, now I'm doing the Reese's Book Club podcast. But I guess like the biggest lesson that I from my rambling that I can share is that if you want something, you must go get it. I think so many people read stories about how people have found success, and people like to rewrite history.
Mhm.
Most of those stories are somewhat concocted. Most people do not get something handed to them. Most actors don't just get a job handed to them. Most models aren't discovered on Lincoln Road. Like people try and they hide the trying, but I don't, because I think trying is winning.
I do not understand. What a disservice. What is the point of doing any of these if we're just spouting sound bites and not talking about the in between? Because the in
Yes.
between is where it all happens. I mean, it's the reality. One of my favorite uh, takeaways from doing my site, and I don't know how much time you have. I feel like I could talk to you forever, I'm
I'm good.
realizing.
I'm
Are
good.
you okay on time? Okay. I was gonna say one of my favorite takeaways, there's this designer, Janessa Leone, she's a hat maker and she does other things. Only once she was successful, and I understand, like at a certain point in her career, I should say, she acknowledged during the Retaility feature with her that she was on the Forbes 30 under 30 list while still nannying. So she was on
Mm,
30 under 30 for her company, but she was still nannying because she was taking that incredible salary that many nannies, here in Los Angeles get, and she was putting it into the aspects of her business that maybe she felt like she didn't thrive or want to, whatever the reasoning was.
yes.
And I thought, how savvy is that? And why don't we talk about moments like that more often? So I love that you broke down. That's
Mm,
so interesting. I have that much more respect for what, and you already,
mm.
you're
Thank
great at
you.
what you do. You're great at what you do. But the
Thank you.
fact that you packaged that and said that this is what's missing, I mean, that's brilliant. That's
Thank you so
so
much.
great.
I
Um,
appreciate that. I think one of the people I interviewed said to me, follow your envy. And I sort of had this guttural reaction because I was like, I'm not an envious person. Like, I really want the best for everybody. And she was like, no, 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 that's jealousy. Follow your envy. And she said, when you look on your phone on Instagram, what do you get those pings of? Like, when you see an author become a New York Times bestseller, like, do you get a ping like, I could do that? I want that. And I got those pings looking at women's conferences and rooms of women. And I was like, oh, I want to be in women's media. And so that helped catapult sort of like my next era, because I was following my envy.
I love it. Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer, even though there's so much more I could talk to you about. I just think how brilliant. So you question everything. And then you also, this is, I would imagine, the second edition, right? Girls Night In.
Yes,
Where
I
did
sent you the new one because I think it's really fun.
It's so cute. I love it. I know it's Girls Night In, but I'm doing a family trip soon with like my in-laws. I'm bringing this. I think it's
Okay, you
so
better take a
smart.
few of the questions out. There's some not safe for work questions that you do not want to know about your in-laws, but most of them are okay.
That's hilarious. Well, see, that's how you know I only have seen so far. But I also
Yeah.
wanted to turn it around and have you answer a few.
Oh, I love that. That's so
Um,
fun.
but before we do that, so where did the idea to do this come about? When did you create all of this?
Yeah, um, well, two reasons. For the first is Larry King was a mentor of mine. And when he passed away, I called him the king. Everybody did. He was Larry King, the king. And so I would always say, like, the king of questions. And people started calling me the queen of questions, sort of like tongue in cheek. And I was like, wow, I wonder, he was so insatiably curious. I wonder if I could put some of my favorite questions together, sort of in his honor, because I think that everybody wants to have better conversation. Um, I don't know if you'll probably know this feeling from interviews, but sometimes you can be having this like very nice regular conversation and it's a good conversation, but then either you'll ask a question or somebody will share something, and like the temperature of the room changes. You just all of a sudden it's almost like your heart's opened, or there's like a connection and it just shifts the feeling. And I love that feeling. I like crave it in an interview. And so I put those questions together so that everybody could have that feeling at a dinner party or with their girls on the couch, because so much of our life is just like trying to catch up and,
Mhm.
you know, and that's fine too. But like, I think it's so fun to like get with your girlfriends who you've known for 15 years and learn something new about them. And so that's really the impetus of the question cards. And yeah, they freaking work, which is so fun. Like it's so cool to watch it. It's like something you made out of your brain and then see it in people's hands. It's so exciting.
I will say, so doing InStyle back in the day, although it's funny, the fashion world thought I covered entertainment. The entertainment world thought I covered fashion. What to me, it was always about people. It was the person
Yeah,
behind it all. It always started with the
totally.
person. But what was interesting was they would send roundups, and we would think on the surface, it's like, what was the first pair of designer heels you ever owned, or something like that. But actually, like I still remember Victoria Beckham going into, I mean, that becomes a whole, it's almost like in some ways her origin story, and her mother's, so you wind up learning with these little prompts, a lot about a person, more than you would
Yes.
expect. Okay,
Yeah.
wait. So this is the one I randomly pulled when I was first going through this. So I want to
Okay.
pose it to you. What's a class, book, movie, or piece of art that completely changed your perspective on life?
Ooh, on life. So there's a lot for me because I feel that artists focus our attention. I feel like we don't hold artists sensitively enough in our culture because so many of them like are the most sensitive people and they put their whole hearts into the world, whether it's through paint or music or writing, and we just rip it apart, right? As cultural critics or as consumers. And I think we're so lucky to have them. And so I hold them in such high esteem. I think Gilmore Girls was a big show for me because Rory was the first girl I saw who was super smart and so cool. And she made it cool to be smart. And I loved First Wives Club. My mom told me to never tell any man that that's my favorite movie on a first date because it's all about revenge
Oh, of
on
course.
men.
No, I love it. That's one of my favorite movies.
It is.
Yes, I made
Oh
my
my God, you're my
sisters.
people.
Yeah, no, at my sister's bachelorette, I literally made everyone watch it. I mean, because they were younger than me. I'm like, how have you not seen this movie? It's
Oh,
so good.
it
It's
is so good.
I
Like
love that.
Bette Midler, Diane Keaton,
Mm,
Goldie Hawn. What could be bad? It's perfection.
so good. I'm an actress. I have
Yeah.
all of them about emotion. Anyway, so good. Well, wait, I could pull more of these, but I don't want to take up too much more time.
So sweet.
Last question would simply be like, what from here? Even though I do believe in living in the now, very much so,
Yeah.
but you know, but looking ahead, what's around the corner?
I don't know how to live in the now. I'm a Capricorn, Midwestern, and a firstborn daughter. So I only live in the future.
I used
um,
to. I used to. I get that.
what now? Okay, I'm really trying to pour into my personal life a little bit. I've never done it. I've always been so work focused. I'm 35 and I really want kids. So I'm trying to date a little bit. Um, I also sort of believe the universe conspires for us. So I'm not like putting too much pressure on it, but I am trying to be open hearted. Um, I am actually, I'm so scared, Lindzi. I've not been this scared since I launched my podcast, but I'm turning the card game into a proper business. And so I made my first business plan, my first hire for e-commerce. And that is going to be like a fully fleshed out business by the next time we talk. And
Wow.
I'm growing Question Everything, and Bookmarked by Reese's Book Club is growing. And so I'm trying to stay on my path. I did what is it called? It's um hypnotherapy. I had my
Oh,
first
wow.
hypnotherapy session. It's not as woo-woo as everyone thinks. It's basically deep meditation.
Okay.
And
See, even deep meditation, other people are like, no, yeah, you're woo woo.
oh, then I'm really woo woo.
No, no, no. You
Um,
go on.
I still have like my Chicago sort of like sensibility, so I haven't fully transferred over to California woo woo, but I'm in the middle somewhere. But I did my first session, and I like was brought to meet my young Danielle, like 6-year-old Danielle,
Oh.
and she told me I was missing the point. That I was so focused on success and wanting things to grow and wanting things to make money that I was missing the point. And
Ooh.
I it was so true. And so, oh, I see you're having a reaction.
I am. Oh my gosh. I see. It's like it. Once upon a time, this never would have happened in it. Like, but I'm just not in that place in my life anymore. No,
Beautiful.
I mean this resonates so deeply because I've been you as well, and I love you. I think you're amazing. I really mean that
Thank
from the
you.
bottom of my heart. But I what you're saying resonates. And that's a conversation for you and I on another day. But what you're
Yeah.
saying really resonates because life for certain circumstances where it's everything I needed on a
Mhm.
personal level and thus professionally, I believe too. But I think
Mm.
it's hard to see that from the outside. But no, so go on because this is very much resonating. So I'm taking the emotion out of it. And what were you going to
Well,
say?
thank you for that because you gave me that feeling that we were both talking about in the interview. So yeah,
Oh,
chills. Thank you.
same.
Um, yeah, I realized that my gift in life is connection. And so you mentioned at the beginning when you said I was one of the only people who responded to your email. One, I felt called because I respect you and your work so much, but also um, I try to go out of my way for people. And I think when you're open to the world, that's like when the magic happens. And I don't know like what all of my shows or my work will turn into, but I know that that is the thing. So that's now the thing I'm after and the thing that I'm trying to share with people. I do need to pay my rent on the way there, but yeah, that's the thing.
Beautiful. On that note, we'll call it there. This was so beautiful. Thank you so much for
Thank
doing
you,
that.
Lindsay. I'm
Yeah.
so grateful to be here with you and for your time. You're gonna have to let me ask you a million questions because now I need all your stories.
Oh my goodness, that's for another day. But yeah, one of these days, if you're based in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I'm in
Okay,
West
yeah.
Hollywood.
Okay. Oh, then one of these days we'll meet up and we'll like
Okay.
without recording involved, we will chat.
I would love that because I'd love to hear more about your path and sort of a few things you were alluding to.
Yeah, absolutely.